Hello and welcome to the Talking Law podcast from Women in the Law UK. I'm Sally Penny. I'm a barrister based in Manchester with practice in Manchester and London. I'm also the founder and CEO of Women in the Law UK, an organisation which is really passionate about professional development, career progression, personal development and well-being in the law and business. This month on the podcast, you'll meet activist and businesswoman Gina Miller. Gina's cases over the last couple of years have led to her being considered a role model to many of us in the law and outside of the law, especially her passion for the importance of the rule of law. I started our conversation by asking her if she saw herself as a role model.
No, and it's so many things that I don't wake up and think. I don't think I'm going to be an inspiration, a role model, brave, courageous, all these sorts of things.
Yes.
I just wake up and think, I'm going to do the best I can do today. That tends to be my thoughts. And try and bring some sort of humanity and kindness in places where we seem to have lost them.
Yes.
And those are about my only thoughts as I wake up. And then its second thought tends to be, well, to gear myself up knowing that there'll be some abuse coming from some direction that day. Yeah. Because when you stand up, and I found over 30 years of campaigning that when you are making a difference, there are those who feel threatened by it.
Yes.
And will therefore seek to silence you or to diminish your voice. And it's then getting my mindset, my head and my heart in the right place to know I'm doing what I do because I believe it's right, and I won't let others define my voice or who I am, where I am and what I'm doing, which they often will try to do, yes. Especially if you have a voice that's making a difference.
Absolutely. I mean, we know you because of the Brexit case, and I hate using that term, or the Brexit cases, but really you have spent your career and your life fighting for the importance of the rule of law and the importance of the rule of law. And I just wondered, where does that sort of motivation originate?
I think it's both nature and nurture. I think I was born this girl or a woman who always has or had growing up and even now a very strong sense of justice. Yeah. I hate bad things being done to people, innocent people. So a strong sense of justice is something that I think I was just born with. And then that was honed by my father. Yes. But growing up with somebody who was very politically aware, and I don't mean a big P, I mean small p, but also very socially minded, very much a social justice campaigner through his entire life. So having him as my father from a very early age talking to me about the importance of the rule of law was formative. And then when I came to the UK and started studying, I also fell in love with history. And when you bring those things together, I think you can see history repeating itself quite often. Yes. And what I realized is that the law and judges, the rule of law and judges, there's almost a playbook that happens throughout history at times of populism, at times of the rise of autocracy, dictatorship, that one of the things used in the toolbox is to diminish the rule of law and the place of lawyers and judges. Yes. Because the rule of law, democracy, human rights are all interlinked and are fundamentally about protecting people. Yes. And so if you want to diminish rights, equality, actually, and also accountability, what those people who want to be in power do is they try to demolish those who practice the law or defend the law. Yes. And it's not something new. It's happened every 100 years or so. So I'm very alert to that. I'm very alert to how important the rule of law is and the practitioners in the rule of law are to the stability of our society. Yeah.
I mean, do you wish you'd been a lawyer?
Well, I studied. I always wanted to be a lawyer. Yes. I mean, I always wanted to follow in my father's footsteps, and it was sort of almost ready-made for me to go back and take on his practice. But once I'd grown up in England, this was my home. Yeah. And I wanted to, and I studied law, and I was about to take my finals.
Yes, I read that.
And I, it's the only thing I ever dreamt of being. I was going to be the first black barrister who was going to the courts. I was going to be the voyage around my father, the one who sent words into the courtroom as if they were soldiers into battle. That was going to be me. And the intellectual, if you like, game of debating and fighting for people's rights is something I always wanted to do. So for me, it was a huge tragedy. It was almost a mourning for me when I couldn't do my finals. And I was faced with this terrible dilemma in that I could have, because I was attacked on campus and I was brutally attacked, sexually attacked, and I couldn't take my finals. And the university at the time, because I was on course for a first, offered to sort of bury the incident by awarding me my degree. And my dilemma was, could I accept that? And I think my sense of justice, I just couldn't. I couldn't bring myself to take something that I hadn't earned. So I said no, and always thought I would go back to the law. So the ironies of finding myself in the Supreme Court twice.
Yes.
But also, there's bittersweetness in life. And unbeknownst to my university, because it's all changed, they awarded me a honorary degree of law on the month 30 years later to the month that I should have actually got my degree.
Wow.
They didn't know it. And I said that in my speech when I accepted my honorary degree, and it brought tears to so many people in the audience.
Oh my
But
gosh.
to me, that was one of the most emotional times, apart from having my 3 children, was actually getting that honorary degree.
Oh my gosh. That is emotional.
It was hugely.
Wow. And of course they didn't know.
They had no idea.
No. Because of course many would have just accepted, the degree and gone off. And I think that's a testament to who you are.
I just think you have to earn what you get, and it's happened throughout my life, and I just have to be comfortable and be able to be comfortable with who I am, what I have, and do I deserve it. So that's just something that is me.
Yeah. Can I ask you then about some of your legal cases? The 2 we know well of, but the Brexit case, the first Brexit case, and the second, really. Why did you bring them?
Because I was frightened. The first case, I was very concerned that if it had gone through and the royal prerogative had been used on the domestic plane, that would completely change the power that sits in our Prime Minister and the executive. Because that would mean that you could use it on the domestic plane to change individual rights. The way we live, work, exist would be at the behest of a Prime Minister and an executive without parliamentary scrutiny, without primary legislation. So it's a fundamental shifting of power. And I couldn't understand why the opposition, why other people weren't speaking up about this, because it seemed to me such a obvious outcome of the actions that the Prime Minister was going to take. And the only conclusion that I could come to in my mind was firstly that perhaps the opposition weren't aware of it, or may have seen themselves benefit from it if they were to come to power. And then the other thing I thought was, in a febrile environment, which it was, maybe they were just too afraid. People were afraid to speak up. And I naively thought that if I did, others would join me. I never envisaged that I was going to be the only claimant in that case. In my case, never. I thought I'll sort of, the thought of brave did strike me at that point. I thought, look, I'll put it up. We'll do this. It'll be all about the black and white letter of the law. We'll keep out all the politics, all about Brexit. It'll just be about parliamentary sovereignty. People will understand that on both sides, any side of the argument, because that's what everyone's talking about. So I thought I would put my name to it and others would join me. So I thought academics, business people, politicians, opposition. I never envisaged I was going to be on my own.
I must say, in the second case, or the latter case, the Prorogation case, seeing you on television when they were streamed live as a lone figure in blue, what was astonishing, and it was visibly a shock for the country in many ways, but in others also, the advocates, of course, were all men, and the only woman that we could see, I know there were women solicitors from Mishcons sitting on the second row, because I think one of them assisted, actually, Lord Panic. But, that was a visibly lonely figure. Has it been a lonely figure? Because you have received a huge amount of threats, abuse, online and off. Has it been lonely, and how have you coped with it?
It has been lonely at times, but I think I'm a bit of a fatalist, and I think, of course, it was going to be me, because it's almost as though 20-odd, 30 years of campaigning sort of led me to this point,
Yes.
where I was strong enough and know myself enough and have confidence enough in what I do to not be distracted, because the abuse is horrendous.
Mm.
It has shown me a society that I didn't know existed in Britain, or I presumed only existed in a very small number, or amongst a very small number of people in the very, very fringes of our society.
Yeah.
You know, the three most common are that as a woman of colour, it's not my place. I should be grateful to be in the country. The second one is that I can't be intelligent enough. It must be that there are men behind me pulling my strings, because I couldn't possibly be bright enough to have brought this case or thought of it.
Nonsense.
And the third is that it can't be my money. That again, it must be that I'm somehow this sort of puppet of other individuals. And all three are completely incorrect, and it is the majority of it my money, my thinking, my case. But I've also noticed something changed between the first case and the second case. In the first case, I think there was an element of shock and surprise and almost pride in a way, though, that as a woman I was standing up. By the time we came around to the second case, it was all vitriol. It was all vitriol. And to walk out of the court, of the Supreme Court, and see people standing there shouting, "Cut my tongue out, I should be hanged," holding a noose outside, and the police doing nothing, was incredibly shocking. I mean, my team were so shocked by it.
Yes.
And they said, "We don't know how you put up with it." And I don't know how I put up with it, but it doesn't get to me.
Yeah.
Because I think it says more about them than it does about me.
Absolutely.
But also, I've always disliked bullies. And it's a form of bullying and silencing, but it's very targeted. And I interpreted that as saying, you must be frightened of something.
Yes. Probably of your intellect and in your power.
But it's still carrying on now, when the battle is won. And it's very intriguing to me, because since the general election, the abuse has dialed up even more.
Really?
And you have to think why, and I'm still pondering as to why, but it's organised. There are, on social media, not that I particularly look at social media,
Yes.
there are many, many more bots. You can tell from how often, how long they've been set up, how many followers. It's presents being sent to my office, presents, I say in the loosest term, emails. It has gone to another level. And particular media have gone to a different level and are making up very elaborate stories. I mean, the day after the election, there was a story that I was in Brussels with 2 lawyers meeting with Barnier, which is complete and utter fabrication. But they've gone to great lengths to what I was carrying. And you have to wonder, why is this happening?
Yes.
And I find it intriguing, because it does say that they're afraid for some reason. And I don't know why.
Yeah.
Because there is nothing to be afraid of.
No.
From the point of view that it's now, the ball is in the Prime Minister and the government's court.
Yes, the case is over.
It is, the case is over. They are, the only thing which I think we all have to keep an eye on and be very vigilant about is their intentions to change the Constitution and rewrite the powers. And I
Yes.
think that is about each one of us staying vigilant
Yes.
and alert to that in the face of a diminished opposition at the moment. But apart from that, they've won. And I find it very worrying. Apart from the fact that it's about closing down voices, is it about closing down debate and voices? If there is an agenda which is one in which it is about diminishing rights, about rewriting what we have achieved in our society over the last 4 decades,
Yes.
then maybe they really don't want a light shone on their activities. And they know I'm quite capable of shining that light. And I will not be dissuaded from doing so if it's necessary. So it's interesting.
Yes, it is. Especially surprises me that it's gone to this level when actually the case is over and we're effectively out of Europe.
Legally, there's nothing to do.
No, legally there's nothing to do. So it's a real surprised and disappointing to see that. Can I ask, in the case, one of the cases I want to ask, we saw Lord Panic. I suppose members of the general public would never, well, actually some may know Lord Panic from the years he was writing in the Times.
Of course.
That I read when I was a student, and then of course came Sir Bob. What did you learn, if anything, from the legal legend that is Lord Panic, from dealing with him and the way that he dealt with the case?
One, on a personal level, is there are so many echoes of my father.
Yes.
Because I watched my father when I was young. You know, he had defended or acted for the Grenada government against the US invasion.
Right.
We had a tragedy in Guyana called Jonestown Massacre, where again he represented the victims of the they were made to drink a Kool-Aid. If they didn't, they were shot in that disaster, in the cult that was running up there. He defended Dominican Republic. He was an internationally renowned criminal barrister and political defender. So there were so many echoes in Lord Panic. But the thing that really struck me is the intellect to be able to translate very complex issues into everyday accessible language.
Yes.
Is a real skill.
Yes.
It's people don't quite understand.
No, they don't.
How much of an intellect it takes to be a translator, and that's what it's. People tend to think that being showing an eloquence is about, or an intellect is about making language as complex as possible.
Yes.
It's actually the reverse to my mind.
Yeah.
It's about making it accessible.
Yes.
And that's what he did with such flair. I mean, the fact that you had millions around the world, and there are people, I've had emails from around the world where people are saying we were fascinated by it. Not only that, we could understand.
Yes.
And isn't that a great power, to be able to make the law and complex issues understandable?
Yes. Yes.
And make people think that they are part of this, and it does affect them. I think that is a masterful skill.
I mean, I have to say, I am an advocacy trainer for the Inns of Court and chief barristers, and that case became a lesson in advocacy, particularly
Absolutely.
when one compares it to the other advocates in that case. Even for those of us who have been at the bar for donkeys, actually, to see that. So it's interesting from your perspective that was so insightful.
And I have to say, for my, being the only client and having to sign off, look at, read every single thing in my spare time, because of course in all of this I've still been running my business.
You've still been running your business.
Well, it could have been exhausting, the whole process, but everybody involved, all my legal team, were just astonishing in the way they allowed me to be not just part of the process and a client, but actually to be involved in the decisions that were being made. It wasn't a normal client relationship. No. And also the fact that we had to do things so quickly.
Yes.
Because, we had to, we were getting things from the government. Deadlines were unbelievable. We had literally 1 day to file the case when Mr. Prime Minister Johnson announced the prorogation. I had I had an inkling throughout the summer, because the other thing that people are not aware of is a preparation. So for the 3 summers, and I mean my children, I have to say, I've promised them on my husband, is that this summer 2020 we may actually have a summer off, a proper summer, because the last 3 summers I've spent preparing cases. The first was the Royal Prerogative case against Mrs. May. The second summer, I spent all of that summer with a different legal team questioning the DUP payment, the £1 billion that were going to the DUP.
Oh,
and we actually were about to go to court, and then the government sent us a letter on the 27th of August saying they agreed with us that it had to be primary legislation. And so the payment that was supposed to happen in the October didn't happen, and it wasn't until the following March in the Supplies and Estimate Bill, and the MPs rubber-stamped it again. So whilst that case didn't have to go to court, I was preparing to go to court on that payment.
Oh my gosh, I hadn't even, yes.
And then the third one, obviously, the prorogation case, where when the government sent us in sort of middle of August in the whole pre-action protocol, because we started writing, or the first letter we sent to Mr. Johnson was actually on the 11th of July, even before he became the Premier.
Yes, that was before.
So because we'd worked back and thought, well, we have to start the process. And so we wrote to him saying, if you are to become leader and you are talking about prorogation, because he was during the Premier or his leadership election, then we said, you do realise, and we started the process, that this wouldn't be legal in our view. And so when we got a letter back at sort of middle of August, which was a very long, very complex, very reassuring letter to me saying your client does not have to bring legal proceedings or approach the courts. We are not considering prorogation. I said to the team, this means they are.
Really?
They had just gone too far. There were too many platitudes. There's, that old saying, protesteth too much.
Yes.
There was just something about the letter, and I thought, no. So we carried on preparing.
Oh, right.
And I think it's because they thought that we wouldn't be ready. So I think they were as much surprised as everyone else that we were actually ready. And so when the announcements were made on 10 o'clock on the Tuesday morning, we filed at 4:30 in the afternoon.
Did you?
Yes. So it was, we were ready.
Do you know, that is some preparation.
We were ready.
I did wonder how it was.
The only thing we weren't ready about, and my team phoned me up, and my wonderful team at Mishcon phoned me up, said, Gina, we have to have a con before we do this, because the one thing we haven't been able to do is have any agreement on costs.
Oh, yes.
They said, you're filing, we have no cost agreement, and the government may not agree one to try and put you off the case. What are we going to do? And I said, well, we're just going to go ahead. And I think I jokingly said in the call to them, what is he going to do? Put me in prison? He could try, because I'm not paying any costs. I said, this is a public interest case, and they can try. And they sort of, at times like that, I think they sort of bolted me being inclined and said, that's not funny. And I said, well, let's see. We'll file.
Yeah. Wow. Oh my God.
They did eventually then afterwards. We did agree costs, but at the time of filing, we hadn't.
Oh my goodness. Well, can I ask you about some positive things? Your book came out last year.
Yes.
Which is amazing.
Oh, thank you.
And in fact, I've forgotten to bring it to be signed, foolishly. But I wanted to ask you really why you wrote the book, how long it took you, and because it's quite personal.
Well, after the first case, I was approached by quite a few publishers who were intrigued as to who I was, and it seemed as though I'd popped up from nowhere, and they were saying lots and lots of people would be really interested, and then they wanted me to write a book about the case, and I thought, how boring.
Yes, exactly.
Why is anyone really going to want to? Or then a book about Brexit. And again, I thought, oh no. And I've always been very engaged with young people, and I speak a lot of sixth forms, a lot of universities, law students, social services, because I was at the Centre for Social Justice for 2 years, and I've been a campaigner for very, very many years. So I've been speaking to young people for a long time. Yeah. But something happened after Brexit. I noticed when I was going around talking to young people, especially young women, that there was a new type of fragility, a new worry about their future, about the pressure they were feeling, about having to juggle careers, be successful, be good at everything. There was a new type of anxiety about having to be successful. And
yes,
somebody said to me, one of them said to me, if only there was a book that didn't make us feel worse. And I said, what do you mean about that? And they said, well, there are so many books out there about being superwomen, about being successful. And when you read them, these women are so untouchable and are so successful, it makes you feel worse.
Yes.
And I thought, well, I can write a book about being honest, about failing, but about showing that it's okay to fail and pick yourself up. That real strength is about the picking yourself up, not about being successful necessarily.
Yes.
So I thought that's what I'm going to do. So I approached several publishers, and they said no. They were very formulaic, if you like, in the book that I needed to write.
Yes.
And I luckily found a publisher who said, well, you can write the book you want to write.
Wow.
And then lawyers came in again, because when I did the first draft, and the publishers saw it, they said, Gina, we're not sure we're going to get this through the lawyers. In 2 chapters in particular.
Oh, yes. Yes.
And so I had a bit of a battle, and so then had to find a huge amount of evidence, and so we have files about my special needs daughter, but also about the chapter on domestic violence, to ensure that if anyone came after me, my ex, and we had the evidence. And, that was because I wanted to be, again, there was this belief that somehow I got there by magic, or it was easy, or that women who are seen to be strong can't have failed at anything.
Yeah.
And I wanted to say that actually strength is something that you learn through life. It doesn't necessarily happen overnight. But also is that sometimes people can be envious of the fact that you're strong and try to break you.
Yeah.
Be it in the place of work or in relationships.
Yes.
The very thing that they admire about you, they can feel threatened by, and then systematically go about trying to break.
Yes.
And it's about power and ownership and all these issues. So I wanted to talk about that. And domestic violence is something, if I say that, I'm a victim of domestic violence, most people think, don't be silly. It's silly women or stupid women or uneducated women or poor women who go through domestic violence. It can't be somebody who is together and strong as they see it.
Yes.
And actually, it can happen to anyone.
Anyone.
Male, female, anyone can be a victim of domestic violence, because as I said, it's about power and ownership.
Yeah.
It's not about you being weak or strong.
No.
And so I very much wanted to write a message to not just young women, but mainly to young people, male, female, to say it's okay to own your failures and then pick yourself up and carry on.
Yeah. Can I ask you about your daughter? Earlier last year, you spoke at the Women in Law Summit organised by Maddox Conferences, and I was there because I was speaking after you, and we were all so moved by your speech. But you talked there about your daughter who has
my eldest daughter.
Your eldest daughter. And I just wondered if you can just share a little about that, really. How did you feel? I have a son who has issues, and so as a mother there's always that constant, you feel like a failure, you're not doing enough. How did you feel about that? You talked about that at the conference.
I think that's the time in my life when I felt the most lonely. You asked earlier about feeling lonely and isolated in this case. Actually, when I had her, she'll be 32 years old this year.
Wow.
But she is a child in an adult's body, so her mental age is only sort of 5 or 6, because she was starved of oxygen at birth. But to be a young mother, because I consciously made the decision to have her young, because I was very ambitious, I always have been. So I didn't want to step off anything. Yeah. So I thought she'd grow with me.
Yes.
Because I wanted to have a child or children, as much as having a career. It wasn't one or the other to me ever.
Yeah.
But at that time, the attitude to a young baby born with special needs was to be put in an institution. And I was told, all the advice from specialists, from everyone, from even her father and his family, were that she should be in a home. And to be, as a young mother, being told you have to give up your child. Even my parents, even my mother was encouraging me, because she thought it would be too much of a burden on me to bring up this child. And the toll on then my marriage, and I was completely on my own. And that's when I felt most isolated, because I had to fight the system, I had to fight the medical profession, I had to fight the legal profession, because people wanted to take her away from me. And that's when I started using the law, because I started fighting for my right to keep her.
Yes.
And for special needs children to have access to special education. But that is when I really discovered not just my own strength and my own resilience.
Yes.
And what more resilience than being a mother and fighting for your child, for your baby.
Absolutely.
You will take every ounce of your strength to defend that child. And that's when I felt lonely, and I had to rely on myself. And there were really, really dark times for me at that point. But, I'd put her to bed and see her sleeping, and, that smell of your baby and that little cut. I would have done anything for her. Wow. And I did.
Yeah, you did. You did. I mean, that is amazing. And what about juggling motherhood?
Oh, you always feel guilty.
Yeah.
There is this whole idea that you don't.
Yes.
You do.
Yeah.
You do. And you have to I always say, when I talk to younger mothers now, I say you have to be kind to yourself. We're not very good at being kind to ourselves.
No.
We go around feeling guilty from one thing to the next and trying to be, and if you're anything like me, I'm sure many of them, we're also quite perfectionists as well.
Oh, yes.
So we have to sort of give ourselves a bit of space, and I sort of prioritize. What I've learned to do is try and prioritize and think, okay, these are the things I'm going to do better than others. But the guilt never goes away.
No.
I'm
so pleased you said that.
But also, it's also this whole myth of work-life balance and what what is the perfect way of doing things. I just think there is no such thing. I mean, when I had my younger two, who are now 14 and 12, I remember there was this Gina Ford book on, and all these baby books. I think you should just burn them all.
Yeah.
Because, what you have to do is listen to your own voice, listen to your own heart, and you know your children better than anything else. And the most important thing, I can tell you this with my children, and I also speak with a lot of young children, so I know how they feel about their parents who work, is as long as they feel loved, the two socks don't have to match.
Yes, here.
They just want to feel that they're loved and secured. And that has nothing to do with the amount of time you spend with them. It's about how you make them feel about themselves.
Yes.
And how close they feel to you. If they feel your love, they are loved.
Yeah.
It's not about how much time you spend with them.
No. Oh gosh, that's such great advice. But just on the well-being, what do you do for well-being? You look great.
I have no idea. I'm not very good at anything
even in
particular.
jeans. And I'm thinking, 3 kids. Why can't I look like that?
I don't stop a lot. I'm very, very fortunate that I don't need a lot of sleep. So I do work a lot, and I found a way of fitting in with them and my work, and then I work at night. It's just the way I am.
Yes.
So it's finding your own rhythm. But I do find time to laugh. So we play games a lot. We watch comedies and silly things. We go and spend time together. Going to plays. I think plays are wonderful, but watching silly films. I think finding time to laugh with each other and be silly.
Yeah.
The childlike part of you is something that keeps you young.
Yes.
So you don't have to be childish, but childlike, I think. And the small pleasures are really important. I don't really spend a lot of time outlaying money to go and do things. I don't, there's no point me buying a gym membership. I'll never use it. There's just no point me buying it. There's no point me trying to go to a spa or facials or anything else. I just literally will never find the time. So, I say to anybody, don't give me these things as presents because I'm never going to use them. So, but what I will do is find time to have, a lovely cup of coffee or tea and listen to an audiobook because I haven't got the time to always read things.
Oh yes, that's me.
Or walk. I love walking, and just finding time. And it doesn't have to be that long, but you do have to find time for yourself. I'm not very good at it, so I'm not the one to tell others.
No,
but I do think you need to find, because you need to look after yourself. If you're going to be a fighter, if you're going to be a campaigner, you are the tool.
Yeah.
So you have to look after yourself, and I've learnt that. I've not always been good at it. I'm only learning myself how to be better at that. But if you want to fight on, you've got to look after yourself.
Absolutely.
That is a lesson I've learned.
Yeah, that's an important one as well.
And lots of water. Water is so important.
Oh yes, I'm going to go reach for some now. This year you received a Lifetime Achievement Award from the Diversity Legal Awards, which are the only awards.
Oh, that was so lovely.
And I missed it, sadly, because I was somewhere else. But I wondered how that felt to receive such a... because those awards are, have tough categories, loads of people nominated, and that particular one is a special award with, many great people before you. How did it feel to receive that? I don't know if you received many awards.
I don't, but it was such a surprise to me. But the evening itself was bittersweet. The reason I say that is that it was an extraordinary thing. As you say, I don't tend to get many awards, so it was just such a surprise. So the surprised element of it was extraordinary because I had no idea. But the evening itself, I found the room was full of so much talent.
Yes.
And the bitter bit of the bittersweet was, I thought, why are these individuals separate from just the professional awards?
Yeah.
Why is there a need for separate awards?
Yes.
I thought it's such a shame after all these years that we still have to have a separate award, that many of the people in the room there should have been side by side with any category in any of the awards that happen in mainstream legal profession, in wealth management. They shouldn't have been separate. So that's when I felt it was a shame. What I did find quite extraordinary and so positive was that every winner of every category, and I mean every category bar myself, when they read the accolades of those individuals, the philanthropic, charitable element was in every single person's CV.
Absolutely.
Everybody who won an award that evening was giving back to their community, had started an initiative, was thinking about how do you bridge the law and communities and society. I have been at other mainstream awards for both, as I said, wealth management, the city, the law, and I have never heard that in CVs before. And I thought, this should be shouted from the rooftops.
Absolutely.
This is how people should be. They give back to the societies and the communities that afford them their success. And I want to applaud every single person in that room for being there, and everybody who won that award that evening. It was an example of how the profession should be operating.
Absolutely. And do you think that we have a profession, as a profession, we have a problem with diversity? It's improving. The entrance levels, brilliant in gender, not so in race, but even gender, but in the senior positions, we don't see the same replicated. No. And so those things are an example of perhaps how we can attract and retain those people who enter the law, irrespective of their gender and their race, and from different social backgrounds. Do you think that's a good way, perhaps, for us as a profession? When you watch the Prorogation case, and my parents phoned me to say, "Oh, there's a black usher," and I say, "Yes."
I know, it's extraordinary, isn't it?
Yes, and that is extraordinary to two professional people not in law and the nation. Watching.
But it's not just the law, it's in my world too, in the city, is that it's not there has been so much emphasis on entry level that is not where the problem is.
No.
There is a problem in middle management. It's a middle level. We have there's a lot of diversity at entry level, both across ethnic minorities, sexual orientation, whatever the diversity is.
Yes.
But something's happening that's not right. The dial is not moving at middle and senior management. And you have to ask, is that about progression? Is there still discrimination about progression? Is it that it's just too challenging to actually balance the demands on you?
Yes.
If you're a mother, if you're from an ethnic minority, if you have a cultural balance, because people see the law as being maybe, and also finance as being, more of a Caucasian cultural aggressive environment. Therefore, do I want to be part of that? It's where people lie and make money, basically. So there is a cultural element of that as well. But I think there isn't enough mentoring as well. But we have to address, but all professions, I think, whatever the profession, I think we have to address, why is diversity meeting a sort of a blockage point at middle management? And it is across all professions. The dial is stopping there, and we have to start thinking about it, because it's not about talent.
No.
I am told so often we don't have the right number of people to progress. The talent isn't there. We need to mentor more talent. I'm sorry, get out there. The talent is everywhere.
Yes.
But you are not there for some reason. Unconscious biases are playing in at that middle management level.
Yes, which would probably explain it. I want to just ask you a question that we ask all our guests. Well, I ask all our guests. I don't know why I keep saying we. It's only me. Do you have a favourite fictional lawyer? And then I'll ask about your favourite book. So I'll give you an example. Some people say, well, the Duchess of Sussex, before she was the Duchess of Sussex, in a programme called... I don't watch much television.
I don't either.
Oh, right, okay. Well, this is going to be no good. So,
I did actually watch one series. It's a friend of mine who, because she knows how intrigued I am about the law. I think I'm the only legal, if you like, geek who's not a lawyer, is what I tell my friends. They all joke about it, but there was this program called Silks a while ago.
Yes.
And, Martha Costello did the Silk.
Yes, Maxine Peake.
Now, what I loved about her, because I watched a few episodes, not all of it, was she was real.
Yes. I'll send you the box set.
No, but she had foibles, and she drank a bit too much, and she stayed up and worked too late, and she couldn't find the right clothes when she was pregnant, and she was sort of real. There was something real about her, and I rather liked that about her.
Yes, well, interestingly, she is Baroness Helena Kennedy, who's a QC at Doughty Street. She's hers as well.
Oh, is she?
Yes. And the funny thing about that character, I know the actress Maxine Peake because she's based in Manchester, where I practice, and she was the artistic director at the Royal Exchange Theatre, where I'm on the board. Is that it felt real. It felt like actually the programme vaguely represented a bit of a normality.
Yes, no, I thought that was great. But the other person I've been told, so those who try to sort of negate what I do, have written to me, I'm Gina Miller, it's just as scheming as that woman, that lawyer who had... There was a series, and I don't know, you may know it, with... it was a president, and the advisor apparently was a lawyer, was a woman. I've only seen a photograph of her. She's very beautiful, so I was like very flattered. But she was a scheming sort of advisor in an American series called it wasn't The West Wing. It's something.
I was going to say it was a West Wing.
No, it wasn't West Wing. It was she was a scheming ex-lawyer advisor to the president. Anyway, it's people say, "Oh, she's just like her."
Oh, no,
it's quite funny. It was quite funny when people think about these things. But the other thing I find very interesting, is I got asked this the other day. So you asked about the awards.
Yes.
So I've had a number of people who've criticised me and said, "Why has Gina Miller been given this award? She's not even black."
What?
Oh yes, it's quite interesting. Is that I don't deserve the award because I'm not black. It's a very interesting thing. Gina Miller should have won Asian Lawyer of the Year, not Black Lawyer of the Year, whatever it was, all these sorts of things. So there's now a nuanced discrimination coming in, which I find extraordinary.
That you're not black enough.
I'm not black enough, and I shouldn't call myself a woman of colour, because I'm not, I'm brown, and you just think, it's extraordinary.
It's nonsense.
It is absolute nonsense.
It's nonsense.
But it is interesting that they're trying... Divisions are being placed in places where they don't exist to try and divide and conquer, and I can feel that. But it's interesting how it's being used with this sort of, you bring down a peg all the time.
Well, ridiculous.
It is ridiculous.
You deserve the Lifetime Award, irrespective.
It was
and there have been people, I think, who won that award for their work, irrespective of their race.
I don't think it's about that at all. But it's.
Well, you look black to me, so,
I don't know what all these. I always say that it's always about competency and respect and achievement. You judge people on that. That's what you should judge people on.
I wholly agree with you, and it's a nonsense to be bringing that as an issue, quite frankly. You have to tell me who, off the record. You mentioned before that you listen to a lot of audio. Audible's excellent.
Well, I've started to.
Yes, well, because I set up a book club. In fact, we have a book club in Women in the Law. Your book's coming out. But I wondered if you've got a favourite book, or a book that perhaps has changed your life.
I don't often have time to read, I have to admit. So I get slightly impatient with books. So I tend to read more pamphlets and academic papers, and so I read a lot of papers and sort of try to understand what's happening in the world from as prismatic a perspective as I can. So I'll read something about anthropology, I'll read something about what's happening in technology, what's happening with agri-foods, and so I want to know what's going on in the world. But two books that I've revisited on several occasions, and really, I suppose, made an impression on me when I read them. The first one was when I was a teenager. It was The Count of Monte Cristo.
Oh, yes.
There is so much in that book, and if you read it again, it is actually a book about human emotions and revenge, and it teaches you a lot. And not only that, it's so beautifully written, but it's an extraordinary book. And the other one, which I have to say, quite frightening, echoes in the book if you read it now, and I started reading it on Christmas holidays, was The Tale of Two Cities.
Yes, that's another favourite.
Do you know, the character of Robespierre is quite interesting against the backdrop of where we are in our history at the moment. But The Tale of Two Cities has many echoes. I think people should read it again.
They're very good choices, actually. I haven't read either of those for a very long time.
They're interesting books.
Yeah, really interesting, actually.
Because at the time of the writers, both Dickens and, when we were at a revolutionary time in our history. And I think we are at a revolutionary time in our history again.
Again, yeah. Gosh, that's really got me thinking. I'll have to read it. Gina Miller, finally, can I ask you what's next? What would you like to do next? You're still running your businesses. You're a highly successful businesswoman, a mother, and you've changed our history. The history books are written. I just wondered, what's next? I mean, apart from planning on a summer, a legal-free summer holiday.
Well, I will go back to doing some of the campaigns I'd put on a back burner, because I only ever thought it'd be a year. I think, like most of us, we thought it'd be a year, and then 3.5 years later, here we are. Yes. So I suppose that some are ongoing and will be much, much longer timelines, and some will be shorter. But the one with the longer timelines, I do believe that around the Western world, modern democracies, one of the things we haven't got right is our form of economics. So trickle-down economics has done more harm than good, from my point of view. The whole pursuit of profit, the aggressive pursuit of profit, has not helped us as a society. So the idea of responsible capitalism is something that I'm going to carry on campaigning. I'd already started before. The idea that we actually should have a triple bottom line rather than just be judged on profit, but the idea of people, profit and planet being a legal requirement for corporates and corporate governance is something I think it would put us in a better place as a society than just the pursuit of profit. So that's a much longer term and much more international campaign, but that's something I'm very interested in pursuing.
Yes.
The second one is, and we will visit it, I think, carry on the conversation in the UK, is it time now for a partially codified constitution?
Yes.
I think it's something that we will carry on talking about. That goes hand in hand with the whole idea of deliberative democracy. Do we need to have something that's halfway between direct democracy and a representative democracy? And again, that is more of a global debate, because other countries are experiencing what we're experiencing too. And then purely on a domestic front, I will carry on, because unfortunately all the things I fought for with my daughter, the advances of respect for young people, children with special needs, because of our lack of funding, we are finding that, or I'm hearing, that a lot of those advances are being reversed. And we have a lot of problems of people with young adults with special needs being locked away, being denied their human rights, being denied access to education, and then domestic violence. There is a alarming increase in violence against women.
Yes.
Young women on university campuses, in clubs. There is use of drugs against women is increasing, and a lot of this is happening sort of under the radar.
Absolutely. Gina Miller, thank you so much for talking law on the Talking Law podcast. It's been a pleasure.
Absolute pleasure.
And wonderful to meet you, and please don't stop.
Oh, I don't have any intention of stopping anytime soon.
A huge thank you to Gina Miller for taking time to meet with me. And a big thank you to you as well for listening to Talking Law podcast. Please do rate and review our podcast, as it makes such a difference in helping other people find us. And thank you for all the lovely messages that are sent to me from people all over the world who find this, my podcast, inspirational. Please keep them coming over to me. I'm on Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram. On the next episode, you're going to hear my conversation with criminal barrister Robert Rinder, also known as Judge Rinder, from the ITV programme. Until then, please do check in and see what we're up to at womeninthelawuk.com, or pick up a copy of my book, Talking Law, which is now available on the website, or you can search for it on Amazon. All proceeds go to my 5 named charities. Others coming up on this podcast are the Secret Barrister, Gillian Long, the in-house counsel for Nicholson PLC, the makers of Vimto, and the spider brooch-wearing, girly SWAT superhero, Baroness Hale of Richmond. I'm Sally Penny. Thank you again for listening to Talking Law.